Thank you so much to our Patreon sponsors today, Tamba Drums, and our new patron, Oi Monkfish. Hello everyone, my name is AndrewAJT, and today we're going to discuss my top 10 favorite bosses in old school RuneScape. Before we get started, you may notice I sound different, and that is because I'm using my headset mic right now, unfortunately. I spilled a cup of water on my USB splitter hub, which caused a lot of problems. My Blue Yeti microphone was connected to this, and even though no water got on the microphone or even the cord itself, I guess something happened and the microphone doesn't really work anymore. You can still record with it, but it's really quiet for some reason, and if I were to bump up the audio a lot, it would sound really bad because of the background noise and such, so it's basically not usable, and I've tried it on other computers, and I will probably just have to replace it, unfortunately. I'll probably just end up replacing it with the exact same one, but if anyone has any suggestions for a different microphone or other things to try to fix it, let me know. It just means that for this video, and possibly one or two more, I'll be using this microphone, which isn't quite as good. It's not that bad. I used to use this for videos as my main microphone actually, but I upgraded in the past, and that's just why I want to apologize for this video's audio microphone quality being not quite as good as normal. There's nothing really I can do about it, but it should be resolved fairly quickly. So anyways, with that being said, here are my top 10 favorite bosses in old school. Keep in mind this is not an objective list of the best bosses in the game. These are my personal favorites, and even my opinion does change from time to time on which are my favorites. Starting off at number 10 is Olm in Raids. This is a very fun boss for a very good reason. The reason this boss is so good is because the more you do it, the better you can get at it. There's so many attacks you have to learn, and it feels very skill-based. It's not really something that you just learn it once and you're perfect at it, or you can just rush your way through with a lot of food. You really have to learn the attacks, and when you get better at it, you can notice the improvement. You'll use way less food, you'll get hit by less attacks, and you'll have a sense of what to do and know what's coming. It has quite a number of attacks too, and they're all very different for the most part, so it feels like it really uses the old school RuneScape mechanics to their maximum potential, and it's also very fun doing it in a big group. I've never done solo raids, so just having the communication with your teammates and staying on the same page I feel like is very fun. It's not like more basic bosses where you just trade each other food and that's pretty much the extent of your teamwork. It really does require a lot of collaboration, and because you have to fight this boss for every single raid, it's very good that it happens to be an enjoyable one. Number 9 is VORKATH, which is a solo-only boss, and I feel like this boss is similar to Zulrah, but just way better. You have a lot more space to move around. The attacks are a little bit more interesting and more satisfying to dodge. I also like how there's some advanced techniques, like you can attack him with a Wook's Walk during the acid phase. It's also very fun to speedrun. Now, generally I don't like bosses where the GP per hour is more consistent. I'd rather have a smaller chance of a big drop rather than consistent GP per hour, but this is an exception. Number 8 is Corp, which is one of my favorite bosses going back to pre-EOC. The thing I like about it in old school is it's very convenient. And I don't think all bosses should be like this, but the nice thing is you can teleport straight there. In old school they have it set up so nice where you're right in front of the cave, it respawns so fast, so you can get a friend or two and stay here as long as you like or leave whenever you want. It's really convenient. And the mechanics are generally good. The core is really annoying, but he can be dealt with a cannon or other methods, or just running the core. The spirit shields are of course legendary items, and the normal drops are pretty good as well, especially the onyx bolts. The only problems are there's not much variety in the weapons you want to use, especially as your primary weapon. You mostly want to stick to the Zami spear. And it's also kind of out of place because there were no quests released with it. In pre-EOC there were 2 quests that really explain the backstory well and were pretty exciting, but in old school it's just one of the most powerful monsters in the game, chilling in a cave in the wilderness with no explanation. It's not a big deal, but it would be cool if they added those quests. Number 7 is Callisto. Callisto is one of the more simple wilderness bosses, and even though it was designed in 2014, it still holds up pretty well. The thing I like about this boss is there's a lot of different strategies, so if you're soloing it, you probably want to lure it to a safe spot, which adds a whole bunch of new dynamics, but if you're doing it in a group like a duo or trio, it is probably just best to do it straight up and kill it with Verax, or you can use the new wilderness weapons like the crossbow or chain mace. It's very powerful and the drops are very good, like the dragon pickaxe, tyrannical ring. Also the pet is only 1 out of 2,000 and it's one of the cooler ones in my opinion. Now it's in a PK hotspot, which most people probably won't like, but I do think it's fun to try to develop strategies to tank PKers, and it's also a fun area to PK in myself, so There's just so much to it, and for such a simple boss, it's brought me a lot of fun. Number 6 is going to be Jad. Now, I try to not really include bosses based on nostalgia reasons because I wanted to pick bosses that are most fun for me to do now, but I'll never forget how fun it was to go for my first fire cape in pre-EOC and how satisfying it was to finally get it. And even recently I did the fire cape Jad pet grind, which was pretty easy, it just took a long time, but it was still very fun, and I think Jad is a very well-designed boss and really ahead of its time. It's really a good challenge for kind of a mid-level PVMer. It's really one of the first big challenges that most players will encounter in PVM that will take them many tries. I mean, there are some quest boss fights, but nothing compares to being a noob and going for your first fire cape, so with all those reasons in mind, it definitely deserves a spot on this list. And if you want to count triple Jads as well, that's one of the most fun fights in the game. Armadillo, I think, is one of the coolest bosses in the game. You can't melee it at all, which is very unique, especially for the time when it came out in like 2007. Not many bosses were like that, where you literally couldn't melee them. It's pretty formidable as well. It has really high defense, and it hits pretty hard even through prayer with range. The one thing I really like about doing it in old school is you can use Chinchampas to chin the minion, and that will actually give Armadillo the defense of the minion on every chin hit, and it's a really cool method, even though it's really expensive, but the risk-reward is definitely worth it because the Armadillo pieces are, for some reason, extremely expensive even to this day, so it can be very profitable. It's probably one of the best duo bosses in the game. The chin method works best when you have an extra person with you, so it's really enjoyable to go with a friend. It's also interesting to plan out your supplies best because Armadillo is the only God Wars boss that does not drop prayer in any form. All the other bosses either drop prayer potions or super restores of the God Wars bosses, but Armadillo does not, so you have to rely on what you bring and also the altar. The Elysian Spirit Shield is also extremely good here. It's one of its best uses overall. Number 4 is a boss that I've only defeated once, but it certainly took more than one try, and that is Zuk, the final boss of the Inferno. This was really interesting because it's not like other bosses, because you're not necessarily fighting the boss most of the time. You're fighting other monsters and you're dodging projectiles and trying to stand behind a shield. It was really interesting, and I had to do a lot of research and studying and reviewing videos of my attempts to learn how to fight it effectively. It's a really intense fight, knowing that if you make one wrong step or one misclick or one wrong move or one last-minute decision that doesn't pay off, you're going to get hit by Zuk, and there's a very good chance that you're going to have to start over and redo 3 hours of progress, which can be frustrating, obviously, but the intensity of it was something I've never felt before in the game until I fought Zuk. Commander ZILYANA is, in my opinion, the most fun God Wars boss. It's really unique because you cannot let her attack you because you can die in a matter of seconds with how fast her attacks are, so you have to fight her from a distance or fight her when she's not targeting you. And this has led to the development of some really interesting strategies with crossbows or Verax or the Zamorak Godsword even. There's a lot of ways to get creative here. VENENATIS is definitely the most underrated boss in the game, by far in my opinion. People don't realize that this boss is one of the best moneymakers in the entire game, and it's extremely AFK and not nearly as dangerous as you might think. I did a lot of strategizing for this boss when I was going for the pet, and I found out that it's really good to have high defense when fighting her, and she also has extremely high defense, actually higher than the Corporeal Beast. But with things like crossbow specs, a double hit cannon spot, tanky gear, and vengeance, you can fight this boss very effectively solo or duo. I do have a guide on this which is very in-depth, which I'll link down below if you haven't seen it. I have a few honorable mentions before we talk about number 1. Scorpia is a very underrated and fun boss. The giant mole is simple and fun. Zamorak is overall pretty decent. The KBD is nice and simple and easy and enjoyable to do. And Bandos actually used to be my favorite boss, especially in pre-EOC, but my interests have changed a little bit. Bandos is a little bit stale for me, I think, but it's still quite good. It was actually my first pet in the game, other than cats and stuff, so I do enjoy going there sometimes still. This is probably not going to surprise my regular viewers, but my favorite boss is definitely Dagannoth Kings without a doubt. This was a pretty easy decision. These bosses are designed extremely well, even by today's standards, despite them being 15 years old now, which is pretty hard to fathom. I remember hearing about these when they came out. There's different ways to fight them at every level of gameplay, so you can be a noob and you can still go and solo Rex with magic. You can be a little stronger and maybe fight Rex and prime at the same time with a duo or in a group or by yourself, and if you're higher level you can also solo all 3 of them, so there's really something for everybody at this boss. I really like how the drops work. It is a little bit unfortunate that some of them, like the Dragon Axe, are worthless now, but you can get the rings and they're rare, but they're not super rare, so you're not going to go days and days without getting any. I mean, that has happened to me, but that's pretty rare. But you're usually going to get 1 per trip, or at least 1 here and there, so there's always a little bit of excitement. And one of the best updates for these was the Dagannoth bones being noted after the diary, which is extremely good, so it means you're always profiting at least a little bit when you go here. And you can get some clue scrolls as well, which is always nice. The variety of it makes it really enjoyable, the rotation of having 3 different bosses that attack you with 3 different forms of combat, and you have to use the weakness in the combat triangle to combat them. It's a really interesting idea. I've always thought the location was really cool, having to go through this ancient cavern to find these legendary kings. The aesthetics of it are really well done. There's really not much more else to say. They're just extremely fun to do, always enjoyable, the drops are good, it's entertaining, and you can't really ask for much more. I made a guide for my method for these in the past. If you want to check that out, it'll also be in the description. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 favorite bosses in the entire game. This list is easily subject to change, and I'm very curious, what would you guys take out and what bosses would you add to your list compared to mine? Definitely hit the like button if you enjoyed, and sub if you haven't already. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter down below. You can join our clan chat in game, AndrewAJT62, and our Discord down below. And if you want to support the channel even further, you can check out my Patreon page in the end screen. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.